Let's just keep it real, shall we? Today was the biggest win Michigan football's had in 15 years. I'll explain next on Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Carter. Waits for it, hit, caught.
This is no time for that. In the pocket and a sack. Tim Jamison.
Brady gets terrific. Throws it, get it, touchdown, Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him, and a leaping interception by Woodson.
Harbaugh back to throw over the middle, caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet, touchdown Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Sack. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
Win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue, welcome to this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. I am Steve Deace, and yes, this was a momentous day for Michigan football. Oh, I know the Wolverines did not play, but we're all consenting adults here. Can we just keep it real? Let's just be honest. Today's the biggest win Michigan football's gotten since beating Ohio State in the 100th edition of The Game back in 2003, which is the last time Michigan beat Ohio State when Ohio State had something on the line. They didn't in 2004, they didn't in 2011. And today is that day because Urban Meyer announced his retirement earlier this morning, setting aside really the last remaining obstacle. My bad. Obstacle to Jim Harbaugh finally realizing the potential we all believed this program had when he took over 4 years ago. Now, there's no question, and Coach Meyer admitted this morning that to some degree, and he didn't say how much, but to some degree the scandal had an impact on his decision to go ahead and retire. And there's plenty of opportunities for speculation. And you could even get through some conspiracy theories out there that might have a ring of truth. For example, was this part of that 16 hours they sat in that room back in August, hashing out, would he be fired? Would he be suspended? Would he be let go scot-free? Could this have been the deal they hammered out back then, which was, hey, go and do well your last year, set it up for Ryan Day, walk out with your head held high and move on and don't have us ignominiously firing you. And, back in September, The Atlantic reported that Ohio State was working on this secession agreement. Ohio State denied it, but today, Gene Smith, Ohio State athletic director, admitted that story from The Atlantic back in September was actually accurate. All right. Urban Meyer said a month ago, no, he's not looking to retire. He will be back next year. But that turned out to not be true either. Urban Meyer said today, it's a complicated question when originally asked, is he done with coaching? And then said, well, I think I'm done. I'm fairly certain, kind of left the door open. I think it's possible that he could be back in 2020. See ya out there, USC. I think you hear Urban knocking, he might be coming in. So regardless of all these circumstances, here's the legacy. outside of the Courtney and Zach Smith scandal, and everything said about Urban Meyer was deserved about that. They didn't really have all the off-field problems at Ohio State that he had when he was at Florida, for example. They actually ran a pretty tight ship, and they won a lot of games in the process. On the field, you're talking about one of the 5 or 6, 7, 8 greatest coaches of all time. He's number 3 all-time in winning percentage. The only 2 guys ahead of him are Newt Rockne and Frank Leahy. Ohio State didn't get better today. I keep hearing these national analysts, because most national analysts, frankly, are lazy. Well, they won't skip a beat. No, you can't tell me on one hand he's an all-time great coach, and then on the other tell me when he walks away they won't skip a beat. All right, both of those things can't be true. Now they're not going to suck. It's Ohio State. They're the one major program. USC had a downturn. We had a downturn. Notre Dame's had a couple of downturns. They're the one. Nebraska's had seemingly a 20-year downturn. It almost feels like. There's only one school of the traditional powers. Even Penn State, before Sandusky, there was a period where Paterno had 4 losing seasons in 5 years. All of the major powers have had that downturn in the recent age. Who has not? Ohio State. They had a down season, and they still went to a bowl game. So any competent coach is going to win 75% of his games just by showing up at Ohio State. The tradition, the resources, the recruiting territory, etc. You're going to win 75% of your games just by showing up. So greatness at Ohio State is going to be measured by what you do in that next 5 or 10%. And there's no way they got better today. Because this guy, when you look at his record against rivals, when you look at 3 national championships, when you look at his record as an underdog, and did I mention again, 3rd all-time greatest winning percentage, they didn't get better today by losing this guy. That is not debatable. What is debatable is how much worse they got. And now that is up to Ryan Day to decide. Later in this episode, I'm going to break down when Michael Spath joins us. I don't think this is another lazy kind of national media hot take. This is like Lincoln Riley. Well, there's actually some striking differences between the situations at Ohio State and Oklahoma with the secession there between Bob Stoops and the situation there between Lincoln Riley and Ryan Day. We'll get into that in just a little bit. But I can tell you this right now. If Ryan Day has full motor functions, he's going to win 75% of his games because he's the coach at Ohio State. The greatness at Ohio State is measured in what he does in the next 5 to 10% of games. In other words, that's kind of where Jim Harbaugh is right now. Jim Harbaugh is winning 75, 80% of his games. And so now it comes down to his greatness is measured by can he win that next 5 or 10%. And the number one obstacle standing in the way of winning that 5 to 10% has been that guy right there. He's been the number one obstacle. Well, he's gone now. Urban Meyer is gone now, which means the last remaining excuse is gone too. Next year, Michigan will go into the season with an entire roster made up of Coach Harbaugh's hand-selected recruits. They get Ohio State at home. It's a much more favorable schedule next year when you look at the teams playing on the road versus at home compared to the schedule that Michigan had to endure this year. He's up against a rookie head coach. The perception now is, hey, it's Harbaugh's turn. It's Michigan's turn to turn the rivalry back in their direction again. They damn well better. Wanted to take a couple of seconds here on Michigan Podcast and say thank you. We are approaching 100 supporters on our Patreon page that has seen some good, steady growth this football season. And that really helps us to have the resources we need to produce this episode for you each and every week here on YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, etc. And so many of you that are watching us right now are kind to put in the $5 a month that we ask you for if you like what we do here. And we just wanted to take a moment and say thank you and remind you that if you're not yet a Patreon supporter of Michigan Podcast, here's just a look as Aaron scrolls up and down the page. These are all content items that we give exclusively to our supporters. And we do this, that's the stuff we do during the year. By the way, my college football picks this year against the spread are well over 20 games over 500 against the number this year. And then we do a lot of neat little features in the off season. We'll keep this up during basketball as well. One of our best viewers sent me a note the other day, said, man, I'm hearing from so many people that want to make sure you guys are to keep doing this during basketball season. We did last year. We're going to do that this this year too. So we just wanted to say thank you to all of you supporting us at patreon.com/Michigan Podcast. And if you wish to support us as well, we want to say thank you in advance, and go Blue. All right, back here on Michigan Podcast, and we're joined by our weekly guest, my partner over at Wolverine Digest, Michael Spath from WTKA there in Ann Arbor. Michael, go Blue. Good to have you with us. And wins the ticker tape parade down Stadium in Maine. This is the biggest win. I said it at the top of the show. I really believe this. It's the biggest win Michigan football's had since beating Ohio State in 2003, which is 15 years ago, and the last time Michigan beat Ohio State when Ohio State had something meaningful on the line. But what say you?
Yeah, I feel similar, Steve. I mean, it shouldn't be a ticker tape parade because Michigan should have taken care of business twice already by now. Definitely this past year, 2016, they should have taken care of business. They didn't do either time. And so, yeah, if you can't beat them, then hope they retire. That's essentially where we're at with Michigan football. Michigan couldn't beat this guy. They couldn't beat Urban Meyer. They tried a couple times, every which way. They couldn't get the job done, and now he's gone, and that should really piss off Michigan fans because, let's face it, I mean, you want to beat the best, and this guy's the best. Nick Saban and Urban Meyer are, you want to talk about the last 50 years of college football coaches, and name me 5 guys better than these two in the last 50 years of college football that have, I can't think of them. Bobby Bowden, I don't think it's as good as these guys. Joe Paterno, I don't think it's as good as these guys. Barry Switzer, I wasn't alive, so I don't really know. But no, these are as good as it gets. And Michigan had 4 chances to beat Urban Meyer, should have beaten him twice, didn't get the job done. That's incredibly frustrating. But hey, today is a better day because your coach now is all of a sudden better than their coach, at least on paper. And for the first time since you said it, since 2003, that maybe Michigan can say that. And really, you'd have to go back to when Lloyd Carr was opposite John Cooper. That's the last time that Michigan had a better coach. And so I guess that's something worth celebrating if you're a Michigan fan today.
Urban Meyer has the 3rd best winning percentage in the history of college football. The only 2 coaches that are better, one guy's named Rockne, the other guy's named Leahy. So that is some incredible company that he is in, and we know what kind of we don't know the holistic picture of the human being he is. We did get a glimpse of what he was doing, what he's willing to do in order to prioritize winning earlier this summer. Obviously, his legacy will be somewhat complicated by that. And to his credit today, he admitted that it bothers him that it will tarnish his legacy, and he said he would be lying if he didn't recognize it. I thought that was breathtaking honesty, and I wonder, Michael, if he had been that breathtakingly honest back in August at Big Ten Media Days, would we even be sitting here today? Because he also said that absolutely the impact of this scandal, he didn't say how much of one, but he said it had a cumulative effect on his decision to retire today. I wonder if we would have seen more of the Urban Meyer we saw today at Big Ten Media Days, or even though in the follow-up opportunities when he came across as cold, callous, indifferent to the suffering of Courtney Smith. I wonder if those things, if we'd have seen the Urban Meyer in those settings we saw today, do you think we'd be sitting here today talking about his retirement?
I don't know, because the part of this that none of us really know, Steve, is whether, how serious the health issues are that Urban Meyer, announced and told. I believe it was Yahoo Sports that first broke it a couple months back. None of us know what those issues really are. I know there's a lot of reasons to say that we don't believe him. There's a lot of reasons to kind of I don't say laugh it off, but dismiss it. I mean, he did this at Florida. He said he was having all those heart problems, and then a year later, he's the head coach of Ohio State. I guess if he becomes the head coach at USC or Miami for the 2020 season, we can all look back and say, hey, he duped us again. But at the moment, I don't think we know if how serious his health issues are. I think that's probably a factor. I think the fact that he He faced all that scrutiny. He didn't really care for it. I'm sure the administration, I give you a lot of credit, Steve, because this is something you've been saying from the get-go, that you thought that this was going to be his last year. The administration maybe put a little bit of pressure on him, like, hey, look, you just won another Big Ten title. You beat Michigan. You can walk out on top like the king of the castle. And maybe it's a good time to step aside. We've got the right guy in Ryan Day that we believe in. So I think those are all probably factors. I will say the one thing, and Steve, I would wonder if you would agree or disagree with this. And this idea that his legacy is tarnished, we might be talking about it because it's right now in front of us, the recency bias. I don't think if he stays retired, that in 5 years or in 10 years that people will bring up Courtney Smith or they'll bring up Aaron Hernandez. What they'll talk about is how he was one of the greatest coaches of all time and won 3 national titles. I think it's a little bit different with someone like Joe Paterno because of the fact that the guy that he shielded was a child molester, and the guy that he shielded ended up getting convicted and going to prison for the rest of his life. And so that stain will follow Joe Paterno around for the rest of his, he's gone, but the rest of the Penn State, his legacy and the whole thing. I think football fans, I think sports fans, forgive and forget. And I think with Urban Meyer, you're going to have Buckeyes that 5 years down the road, if they haven't won a national championship, they're going to be reflecting on, if we just had Urban Meyer here, the good old days, and we'd be winning national championships, and they won't ever bring up Courtney Smith and Zach Smith in that conversation at all.
I think that's a fair observation. And, there's degrees of tarnished. I don't think it's a scarlet letter. No pun intended. But I just realized what I did there after I said it. But here's the thing, too. If we're going to be as fair as we can be, you didn't have the rash of off-the-field problems at Ohio State like you had towards the end of his tenure at Florida. And so clearly he learned something from that. I mean, they weren't having a whole bunch of guys get busted or anything of that nature like what we saw at Florida. And we actually saw this at Penn State at the end of Joe Paterno's career as well. They had a ton of issues with off-the-field incidents and players. We did not see that at Ohio State. Really, the only thing that was scandalous at all we saw his entire tenure was what happened with Zach and Courtney Smith and his role in covering that up. So I think that's a fair point, nor am I even arguing that it should irrevocably tarnish his record. It clearly impacts his legacy to some extent, and he talked about that today. He was asked if he's done coaching. At first he said, well, that's a complicated question. And then when he was asked to clarify it later, he said, well, I think that I am. I mean, there's clearly some form of a door left open. I believe he's got a serious health issue. How serious, nobody knows. But I think that it's quite possible, if not even likely, we see him coach again at some point in the future. I could look at an environment like you mentioned, USC, where I know it sounds weird because it's LA, but it's not nearly the media fishbowl Ohio State or even Michigan is, because there's a million distractions. You don't have to be worried about, what am I doing to, fed every high school coach in May in California. You're at USC. You just got to start calling recruits about 2 weeks before signing day because their kids always commit late anyway. I could see that being a potential marriage down the road, depending on how much he can manage the symptoms, no question about it. When you get to the impact on the rivalry, let's look at it first from a Michigan perspective and then an Ohio State perspective. 2 things from a Michigan perspective. We'll take these one by one. I don't buy the whole, it taints the rivalry that we never beat him. You made this point this morning, and I've echoed it. Nobody at Ohio State is acting like, James Laurinaitis isn't acting like, I didn't really feel like I beat Michigan because it was Rich Rod. No one's doing that.
Yeah.
All right. And nobody at Michigan is sitting there thinking, well, Lloyd Carr was, only great against John Cooper, so those games don't count. If Michigan beats Ohio State a year from now, literally nobody other than Ohio State internet trolls is going to bring up or care about Urban Meyer's record. If over the next 10 years, Michigan wins 6 or 7 of these games, no one's going to care about Urban Meyer's record. I think that's social media fanboy story fantasy trope.
No, I'm right there with you. I think the comparison I made was Mark D'Antonio is 8-4, I believe, in his career against Michigan. No one in East Lansing breaks it down and says, well, he was 3-0 against Rich Rodriguez, and he was 3-1 against Brady Hoke, and he's 2-2 against Jim Harbaugh. That's not the way it works. Mark D'Antonio was 8-4 against Michigan. Okay? And so if Michigan goes out there and beats Ohio State next year, Jim Harbaugh will not be 0-4 against Urban Meyer and 1-0 against Ryan Day. Jim Harbaugh will be 1-4 against Ohio State. But everybody in Maize and Blue will certainly, including myself, be very excited that he is got at least that one win. I think there's a lot of Michigan fans that if they don't want to admit it, because I posted that poll if you're more disappointed or relieved, and most fans, I think it was like 60% said disappointed. They never got a chance to beat them. But if you're being honest with yourself, I think you're relieved.
No doubt you're relieved. You're relieved. You're relieved
yeah.
the day that the NFL is going to be relieved when Bill Belichick retires. The SEC is going to be relieved when Nick Saban retires. You know, hey, I believe in maximum effort and never quitting. I also believe in admitting reality. People are better than you at some things. This guy's better than us at this. Doesn't mean we would have ever beaten him, but the idea that we were ever going to reverse the polarity of the rivalry with him there simply is not realistic. It's like, wishing I'm going to be the last son of Krypton. This guy is one of the greatest of all time. He's better at this than us. He's better at this than Jim. It's a good day for us that he's gone. We should all cheer.
Yeah, and I had someone that was responding to me on Twitter and said, I don't think you can unequivocally say that he was a better coach than Jim Harbaugh because of what Jim Harbaugh did in the NFL. And I said, people need to stop paying attention to what he did in the NFL and start looking at what he just did in college football. And in college football, Urban Meyer was a superior coach to Jim Harbaugh. Now, down the road, maybe Jim Harbaugh will have multiple national titles and we'll be able to put him in that same category. But right now, he's done it like people would bring up, well, Jim Harbaugh did it at San Diego. Now and Urban Meyer did it at Bowling Green and Utah and Florida and Ohio State. He's a better coach. We can all admit that. The moment as Michigan fans that we admit that, the better off we're going to be.
Yep.
Now here's the question. They're facing Ryan Day. Is Ryan Day a better football coach than Jim Harbaugh? Well, he'll have an opportunity to prove that. I think you asked to look at this from both sides of the rivalry. Michigan fans should be relieved today. Michigan fans should be excited today. Michigan fans should be, after that humiliating, embarrassing loss to Ohio State, you and I were in the same place. We didn't know how we were going to recover from that as fans. This gives us an opportunity for hope because I think both of us were a little bit hopeless after that. Like, well, as long as he's there, when is Michigan going to beat him? It's not going to it didn't happen in 2018. It might not happen in 2019 or 2020. When are the stars going to line? Well, this gives us a little bit of hope, and it's not the type of hope that you want, but it's the type of hope that we're getting as Michigan fans, and so you have to embrace that. On the flip side, I have a friend of mine who is a big Buckeye. I said, "What do you feel like today?" And he goes, gosh, I'm worried that this is going to be, he's like, we've enjoyed this rivalry for so long. I'm worried this is going to be the day that it flips on us. That is an actual fear in Columbus, but it was an actual fear in Columbus when Michigan hired Jim Harbaugh too. And that's the nature of Buckeye fans. As good as they have it, they're always worried that it's going to be taken away from them, that somehow it's going to go back to the John Cooper era. Anybody that lived through that is older than, what do you have to be? I guess 25 years old, is worried about the John Cooper era coming back. And so that's where they're at today. They really like Ryan Day. They think he's a good coach, but they're kind of like giving him a 2-year window. If he goes 0-2 against Michigan, I tell you what, Ryan Day is probably gone from Ohio State, and they're going out there and hiring, in their mind, the next Urban Meyer.
Yeah, I'm sure Michigan State feels like the NCAA tournament Tom Izzo won in 2000 just doesn't mean as much because Michigan went on probation and had Brian Ellerby, and that's how they were able to recruit all those Flintstones. I'm sure that's exactly how they feel. It's a fan trope. One more thing on the Michigan side of this. I think what's being, and I agree that that Jim Harbaugh's job got easier today, but I think the pressure increased substantially today. And I think that's the one part people don't understand. First of all, he's already the only Michigan coach ever to be 0-4 against Ohio State. And I think because of where the program was when he took over, the fact that he's got him in the New Year's Six Bowl and in the top 10 for the second time in his 4 years, that a lot of, and the other guy happens to be an all-time great coach. People have just kind of resigned to, if this is the worst, we go 9-10 every year, or win 9 or 10 every year, we can put up with it. You go lose that game at home next year, especially if like Shea Patterson comes back. You lose that game at home next year to a rookie head coach, and you're 0-5. I don't think people, around the country, they've had this wrong with Harbaugh all along. At first, they said he was going to take 5 years to rebuild a program. He rebuilt it in 1 year. And then they said, well, he's Urban Meyer's equal right away. And then he wasn't. And then they said, well, because he's not Urban Meyer's equal right away, that means that he's a crap coach and should get crap canned. They were wrong about that. And now today, they're all talking about instantly the rivalry has turned over and it's a great day for Michigan fans. But I'm telling you right now, all the hot seat talk that I didn't buy into for the last year, he loses that game next Thanksgiving weekend at home to a rookie head coach like this. Michael, you host that show in Ann Arbor. You know what the audience is. For the first time, that hot seat talk will be legit. People will be out of their damn minds if he's 0-5 and it's to the rookie head coach at Ohio State. Am I wrong?
No, you're dead on. I mean, I tell you what, look, right now there is, I would say about 15 to 20% of the fan base that has gone, I don't want to say off the bend here, but there's a 20% of the fan base that has essentially lost faith in Jim Harbaugh. If they were to lose that game to Ohio State rookie head coach, especially if it was a similar situation where you had all on the line and you lost it, I think it might be a point of, I don't say of no return, but we're seeing this in Detroit right now.
It'd be Matthew Stafford. Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because people in Detroit have been listening to people in the media. They've been listening to the team. They've been like, okay, they don't have the right pieces. Okay, they don't have the defense. Okay, he's gone to different coordinators. Okay, he's gone to different coaches. They've been keep on making excuses and excuses and excuses for Matthew Stafford. And this year in this market, I can tell you that like the fan base has just turned on him. Like it's sour. It's soured milk. No one wants it anymore. They want to throw it out. They're done with Matthew Stafford. The hypothetical, if Ryan Day were to go 1-0 against Michigan, I think you'd see a huge part of the fan base turn on Jim Harbaugh. I hope that day doesn't come. This is a glorious day for Michigan football fans, Steve, and honestly, I mean, but I agree with you. There are no excuses. I mean, if I know you listen to my show, and I think it's interesting that, last offseason we talked, and so many people that call up the show, everybody on social media was, no, he's got to get it done in year 4. Of course he's got to get it done in year 4. There's no excuses in year 4. And as soon as they lost that game, it was, well, we always thought it was going to take 5 years. The talent's not good enough yet to compete with Ohio State. You can't be hard on him. He's won 10 games for the third time, so they moved the goalpost. I always get accused of moving the goalpost out. There's a lot of the fans that are moving the goalpost in. But if they were to lose that game to Ohio State next year, you might as well just rip the goalpost down.
Yeah, I'm reminded one of my favorite all-time coaching quotes came from George Perlis at Michigan State, and they asked him when he took Sparty to the Rose Bowl in 1987 in his 5th year, and when he got hired in '83, he guaranteed that by the end of his 5-year contract he would return Michigan State to the Rose Bowl. And the NBC crew, Dick Enberg, Merlin Olsen, they asked him, "Well, how did you know you're going to do that in 5 years?" He said, "Hell, I didn't know. I just knew I had a 5-year contract, and if we didn't go to the Rose Bowl, I was going to get fired anyway, so I had nothing to lose by throwing that out there." All right, so. Wow. That's a little bit of what you're talking about. If you go 0-5 and it's the rookie head coach and it's at home, yeah. So let's get to the Ohio State side of this, because I'm seeing this comparison a lot. And on the surface, I can understand why people are making the Lincoln Riley, Ryan Day comparison. Mm-hmm. Now I live in Iowa, and I've got a lot of friends at Iowa State. I used to own an Iowa State publicity publication. I've followed Big 12 sports quite closely. Here's why the situations, on the surface, there's some similarities, but here's why they're not as similar when you go deeper than people think. Number one, at Oklahoma, as dominant as Urban Meyer has been at Ohio State, Oklahoma is even more dominant in the Big 12. In Bob Stoops' tenure, you want a crazy stat, Michael? In Bob Stoops' tenure, he won more Big 12 championships than home games he lost. Okay? There was no number 2 team in the league. Texas has been down for a while now. This is the first year that Texas won more than 8 games in the regular season since 2008, 10 years. They don't have a second team. They've gone through a major split. Also in Stoops' system, the offensive coordinator is the co-head coach. When Mike Leach was there, he coached that offense all by himself. Lincoln Riley coached that offense all by himself. So at Ohio State, Urban Meyer's an offensive guy. There's already a co-offensive coordinator besides Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson. Secondly, you're looking at 4 of the top 7 winningest programs of all time are in the Big Ten. And 2 of those are in Ohio State's division with coaches right now that if they continue on the trajectory they're on, their resumes, they're going to be in the College Football Hall of Fame if James Franklin and Jim Harbaugh continue with the resumes they've already compiled, if they finish that way. So there are second and third, and we haven't even talked about D'Antonio and Michigan State. That's a Hall of Fame resume. You look at the program Wisconsin has built on the other side of the division this year, notwithstanding the depth and coaching talent that Ryan Day is going to walk into is totally different. It's also different in that Lincoln Riley has essentially been the co-head coach at Oklahoma for 2 years. Third, Lincoln Riley inherited 2 of the biggest quarterback recruits Oklahoma's ever gotten. One of them fell in their lap as a transfer, and the other, and that's Baker Mayfield, and then the other was Kyler Murray that was recruited by the previous staff. He's going to lose Dwayne Haskins. Haskins is, I think, going to be the top quarterback taken in next year's draft, and then he'll inherit Tate Martell, who was a 5-star prospect, but it's a lot different than you're coming in as a rookie head coach, and Baker Mayfield is your starting quarterback that you put the entire program on. So when you look at the caliber of competition in the conference, when you look at the amount of authority handed to Lincoln Riley compared, and by the way, the jury is still on Lincoln Riley. You know, Lincoln Riley's won a lot of games with the 2 best quarterbacks in the history of that program back-to-back. When those guys are gone next year and he's got Austin Kendall at quarterback, are they going to be 12-1? We'll see. Who knows? Because really the true test usually comes in year 3, 4, and 5 anyway, when it's your own players and the guys you've recruited. So I think Lincoln Riley was more prepared. Also, Lincoln Riley came in June, which means it was after signing day, after spring ball, meaning that if players wanted to leave, recruits didn't want to come. It was already too late. The meal was already cooked. The horse had left the barn. This is a lot different. There's opportunities for assistant head coaches if they don't like where they fit in the new hierarchy to move on. Recruits can move on. I think this is a much more difficult situation. And then you're taking over. Here's the reality, Michael. There is no doubt Ohio State got worse today. That's not debatable. You don't get better by the guy with the 3rd best winning percentage of all time retiring. Now, you and I would probably agree that if anybody's competent at Ohio State, they're going to win 75% of their games by showing up. The next 5 to 10% is what defines greatness. And there's no way he can be better than that guy. It's not even possible. So he's a downgrade from day one.
Yeah, no, you make a lot of good arguments, and some could argue that Lincoln Riley is a bit of an upgrade. I tell you the 2 things that I think he'll have that maybe give him an advantage over Lincoln Riley. Even though Oklahoma has certainly had its success recruiting the state of Texas, and Oklahoma is a decent recruiting state. Ohio is a better recruiting state. Mm-hmm. So, and Ohio is the only program in the state of Ohio. And so he's still going to be able to turn around in his own backyard. And as long as he has that scarlet O on his chest, he's still going to be able to pick up the best kids from his own state. Yep. And that is a very powerful resource. So that's going to help him. Well, that's why any competent Ohio State head coach wins 75% of his games just by showing up. Yes. The second thing I wonder about a little bit is both of these guys were anointed by their previous head coaches. And while Bob Stoops was an incredibly successful coach, there was always a little bit of I don't want to say nepotism, but people were never quite fully happy with Oklahoma because he wasn't winning national championships except for was his first or second year back in 2001. That was his second year in 2000. So yeah. So there's a little bit of all right, this is his guy. So I think there's a little bit of, I don't say trepidation at first, but a little bit of he really had to prove himself. Ryan Day has to prove himself. I wonder if the guy turning it over to him has a better reputation among his fans than Bob Stoops did. Not in terms of his character, but in terms of he just beat Michigan. He just won the Big Ten title. He's 6th in the college playoff rankings. He won a national title most recently. Almost like if you've got the king turning it over to someone, you're more likely to give him a chance and give him an opportunity. Now, is he as good of a coach as Lincoln Riley? I mean, that's to be determined. And as you said, you're right. This is a step down from Urban Meyer. There's no way it can't be. But I do think those 2 things will help his reputation and give him an opportunity to be able to continue to recruit at an extremely high level and at least give him the athletes over the next 2 to 3 years that he's going to get to prove himself. And I really I really don't think it'll be more than 3 years. If he has not won at like a Lincoln Riley type level, and he's 1-2 or 0-2 against Michigan the next couple of years, I don't think Ryan Day is long for Ohio State. If on the flip side, he's 2-0 or 2-1 against Michigan, and he's in a college football playoff, and then, I mean, he'll stick around for another 10 years or so.
Great stuff. Michael Spath, WTKA in Ann Arbor, and Wolverine Digest joining us here this week again on Michigan Podcast. Good to talk to you as always, brother. We'll do it again soon, okay?
All right. Thanks so much.
All right. Go Blue. If you want to keep up with what we think about the Wolverines all week long, aside from when we're doing this for Michigan Podcast, check us out at WolverineDigest.com or Wolverine Maven, part of the Maven Network, WolverineDigest.com. Myself and Michael Spath from WTKA in Ann Arbor, we keep you up to date with our commentary all week long. And one of the really cool things I love about how this site works is that the sidebar there where we can give you, almost like a Mike Florio does at Pro Football Talk, where you can give you little mini updates via Twitter and other interactions, things that you probably want to know, be aware of, but don't require 500 to 700 word columns. I love that part of our website. It's a really easy, functional website to follow, WolverineDigest.com. So these were the Twitter poll results from the question that's kind of obsolete now, but still interesting nonetheless. Before he stepped down today, we asked you, do you believe Jim Harbaugh will ever beat Urban Meyer? 51% of you said no. 49% of you said yes, which means you were pretty split on that question. I don't understand anybody who wanted Urban Meyer. If you're a Michigan fan and you wanted Urban Meyer to stick around, you're just, I don't get you. Well, we want to beat the bet. I just want to beat them. And frankly, it's easier to beat them when they're at their worst. Like I said, like I was talking to Michael Spath about a few minutes ago, nobody at Ohio State's like, damn, man, those wins over Michigan didn't count when Rich Rod was the coach. They're not doing that. Tom Izzo's like, I really don't feel good about my one NCAA tournament championship because, Michigan was in a dumpster fire with Brian Ellerby and probation and tractor trailers, truck turning over and everything else. And it just doesn't feel like I really earned. No, nobody's doing that. All right. People have done a really good job. Michigan State has done it in football and basketball. Ohio State's done it in football. There's been a lot of people around here recently doing a really good job of taking advantage of our screw-ups, of our misfortunes. It's about time we start taking advantage of theirs. It's only fair. This week's question of the week. Titanfall, an Ohio State fan, says, can you please keep Jim Harbaugh? We Buckeye fans love whooping his ass every year. Well, we're not getting rid of a coach who has won 10 games, 3 of the 4 seasons he's here. And now we'll find out, is Ohio State better than Jim Harbaugh or was Urban Meyer better than Jim Harbaugh? And we're going to get that answer in November, and it better be the right one. Want to thank our partners for helping us spread the word at Detroit Sports Podcast. Thank you for following us each day at Michigan Podcast on Twitter. Check out our editorials, our columns, our analysis each day at WolverineDigest.com. Next week, we will have a Peach Bowl preview against the Florida Gators. Also, I keep getting asked this. Yes, we're going to be here for basketball season. Are you kidding me? I mean, by some accounts, we're a basketball school now. We're not missing out. We love basketball. I'm a huge basketball guy. Yes, we're going to be here for basketball season. Hey, and while you're there at YouTube, if you could give us a like on our videos, particularly this episode, subscribe to our channel. We would appreciate it. If you're listening to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, etc., give us a 5-star review. Hit that subscribe button. We would appreciate that as well. Until next week, go Blue.